Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another video today. We've got another interview, which I've really been enjoying doing these. So I'm very thankful for Nico to be joining us today. Nico is another Spanish learner in the community. He doesn't have a YouTube channel at the moment, but he's quite active on Discord and Reddit in the community. So Nico, do you just want to introduce yourself and just tell us about your Spanish learning journey?
Yeah, nice to meet you, Luke, first of all. I'm Nico. I'm originally from Greece, but I've been living in Germany for about 15 years now. And I
Mhm.
started Spanish. So my Spanish journey, I think, is a bit different than the other stories we've heard here because I tried to start a few times and I failed until I kind of discovered like the comprehensible input thing. So I really wanted to start with Spanish since 2013 when one of my bosses told me about Duolingo back then. And I
Mhm.
was like, oh, that sounds interesting. I try it out. So I tried it in 2013 without any reason. So I was like, just some game kind of like to see how far along I can get on my Spanish. And then I started it, and then I used to do like daily goals and everything. But I felt like it didn't like after 1 or 2 months, I think I completely stopped doing it because one day I just didn't do it, and then I lost my whole sequence, everything. So I was like, okay, there's no motivation anymore. So I stopped it for a few years, and then the second phase was during Corona, basically. In 2020, I
Mhm.
was like, I have so much free time on my hands, like working from home or like being at home all the time. So I started again. Like I bought a textbook that was called like Easy Spanish Step by Step, I think, which was
Mhm.
very good, like high reviewed on Amazon. And I was like, okay, I'll try it out. But then it was also like very very slow, and also I had to fill in like I don't know, kind of like questions and like do grammar stuff, and it wasn't really working, to be honest. And I discovered reading Spanish back then, but it was like in the very beginning phase of it. So it was not so much content. And I didn't, to be honest, I didn't trust a guy talking on a camera and doing drawings. So I was
Yeah.
like, yeah, that won't work.
Yeah.
So basically when I really started was in like August 2022. So kind of like 2 years since now. And then I decided I'll do just comprehensible input. I inform a bit myself a bit more, and I was like, okay, I'll just do it for a few months, see how well it goes. And then I realized I could do more and more hours every time.
Mhm.
So it went kind of really fast since then.
Yeah, awesome. Well, that sounds like I guess, sort of a stereotypical start to the journey where you tried to start learning Spanish, and then you failed a few times, if that's how you want to say it, and then you
Hmm.
found comprehensible input, and you started to realize that this sort of worked. Was there a moment where you started using comprehensible input and you were like, this is legitimate, I can now start to understand things harder? Or was it just that like slow progress that most of us have with it?
Well, I think so. For me, at the beginning was like, okay, let's see the Dreaming Spanish roadmap and the levels, and I was like, okay, I want to reach like a level where I will be able to understand. So if I can understand without any visual clues, then I will be I will be happy, and then I will continue this journey. So it was like I started end of July, like the last day of July in 2022, I think the 31st of July, and then I was like, okay, let's see how fast I can get to a level when I can listen to like podcasts or Spanish podcasts
Mm-hmm.
without like when I was running or when I was like doing groceries or stuff. So I think
Mm-hmm.
it was easier. And I remember myself at the beginning in August, the whole of August, I was doing like 1 hour or 2 hours a day, and I would just watch like these videos, and I would not be bored, but it was like, okay, I was looking forward to something more exciting, more interesting. And
Sure.
then I remember when it hit me basically when it was September, mid of September in 2022, when I was on holiday and I was listening to some podcast while running, and I was like, okay, I can understand this. I don't need any video, any drawings, nothing. So I think that
Mm-hmm.
was the moment when I realized, okay, that works. It's not like a myth, the whole comprehensible input
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, for sure. Because it does sound like a myth and sort of a scam at the start. In terms of
Hmm.
understanding, you're like, well, what do you mean? I just sit here and watch videos, and eventually I'll pick it up. But as people like you and me know, that you do just pick it up over time. So no, that's really good. And I often ask other people this as well, in regards to when you use Dreaming Spanish and comprehensible input. Did you Were you sitting down for a number of hours per day? Or I know you just mentioned you go and run sometimes and listen to podcasts. Did you have a schedule? What was the situation day to day?
So at the beginning, it was like, because as I told you, it wasn't very engaging, the whole thing I was watching, so I would have to force myself to sit and watch. So what I would
Yeah.
do is like I would put on YouTube on the television like Dreaming Spanish, or I would put like, I don't know, even channels like Spanish with Alma, or there were some other beginners channels, right? So I would put them on, and then I would just watch them without having my phone or my laptop on me, like just without browsing or doing anything else. So I would just watch them for like 1 or 2 hours after waking up. And then I wanted to basically get this done and then have my day off, kind of like free day. So this was kind of my routine at the beginning, and like I spent a lot of hours, like a lot of weekends, on just watching like 2 or 3 hours on YouTube, or like Peppa Pig or stuff like this. So that was it. But then basically, like talking a few months later, it was kind of like, okay, I just put on a podcast when I was cooking, or when I was doing like groceries, when I was running on my way to work, or whatever it was. And then it was much easier to like find input. Like it still was like input that was like like people would speak slower in the podcast, right? But it was still like I didn't have to watch in front of a TV or a computer and watch it.
Yeah, for sure. I think once you sort of hit that point where you can, I think Chris explained it, who I had on a previous episode that I know you know. He said, I think he said something like, you can finally escape from your chair once you hit the point of like you can understand stuff without visual cues. You can sort of get on with your day-to-day life and implement it in that in that way, like going to the shops or going to the gym. But were you, I know you said you did the 2 to 3 hours where you were just concentrating, and that's all you were doing when you started off. Did you continue to do that as you went on, or did you sort of drop that and you just sort of only implemented it when you wanted to? What was the situation like going forward in that intermediate phase?
Yeah, so at the beginning it was about 1 to 2 hours until I reached like the intermediate level, and then I felt like it got easier to consume input. So I was like, I would up it to like 2 or 3 hours, and then I would always do all these calculations. I'm sure you did it as well. Like, okay, if I do 2 hours a day or 2.5 hours a day, how long will it take me to reach this level? And I think this was kind of what motivated me to do all of this thing with streaming Spanish, because I would look, okay, I would see, I want to have by the end of 2024 or by the end of 2023, I want to reach this level. And at the beginning, it was really hard because I couldn't imagine doing more than 2 hours, because I felt exhausted, like listening to Spanish all the time. And then, I don't know, doing something else or having to work and also enjoying my hobbies. It was like so time consuming, right? But then I felt like as I advanced, it get kind of easier, and then it got kind of a routine. So I would put on my headphones while walking, and then I would be listening to Spanish, and then I wouldn't have to think of it as like I was doing a task or I was learning a language, because it was like I could listen to content like I could find engaging and understand. So like I would listening to a podcast, like telling the news in Spanish, or like some stories in Spanish, which is not like videos that are just for learners, right? So it got easier to up my hours after a certain point, I think.
I think
I got frustrated when like
the exact same with me. Sorry, I was just saying I found the exact same with me. Like when the hardest part's to start, and then once you start, it gets really easy to start watching or listening to native Spanish content.
Yeah, when I think back then to that time, is really like I'm thinking, okay, if I would learn a new language with comprehensible input, I dread this beginner hours and super beginner hours, because it's like it's kind of boring. I mean, I have to admit, right?
Yeah.
So you just watch videos that you don't really enjoy, but you have to watch so you can get to a level where you don't need the videos anymore. So I feel like getting beyond this stage, beyond this phase, like the most difficult part for me.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of learners would sort of resonate with that as well. The people that have used Dreaming Spanish. So you've gotten all these hours in. Do you know how many hours you're at currently? Are you tracking them? I know some people prefer to track, some people don't.
So basically, I've completed the whole Dreaming Spanish roadmap. I'm at level 7 right now. So I think I'm at 1600 to 1700 hours, around that point. So somewhere in the middle. I still track my hours, but there is no more Dreaming Spanish levels. I still want to track them maybe until I get to 2000 hours, but then I think after that it's like it's part of my life, I'd say, or do everything in Spanish right now. So I consume like YouTube in Spanish, so my YouTube feed is in Spanish, and I can watch like, I don't know, tech reviews or like movie reviews, book reviews, whatever I want in Spanish. So I think that makes it much easier to consume input. And then it doesn't, right now, it doesn't feel like I have to force myself to like do it when like compared to like 2 years ago. But I still want to track my hours until 2000 hours maybe, because I feel like it's a milestone as well. But then I think I'd stop with it. It's also like kind of, I don't know, like kind of OCD stuff. Like I don't know,
Yeah.
I like tracking stuff and like looking at numbers. So
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think a lot of people that sort of do this dreaming Spanish journey probably have a little bit of that in them as well, where it's like they just like tracking and sort of
yeah,
ticking things off and meeting milestones, which is, I think it's a great way to sort of gamify it in a sort of healthy way. I think it's really good. So no, that's obviously really impressive, the amount of hours you have, and I just wanted to say as well, I listened to your interview with Worlds Across. I'll put the link to it in the description. Um, where you obviously did the interview in Spanish, but your speaking sounds great. Like, to me, it's probably one of the better examples I think I've seen from someone who's used Dreaming Spanish, to be honest. So, well done on that. And how did you approach the speaking aspect? Obviously, I think everyone sort of knows about the input aspect now of like, okay, well, if I consume 2,000 hours of Spanish, I'm most likely going to be able to understand native content to some degree. But I think speaking, people are still figuring it out. What's the best method? How many hours? Over what time period? What are your thoughts on that, and how have you approached the speaking aspect?
yeah. So during Spanish, I and Pablo suggest like you don't start speaking until you have at least 1,000 hours, right? Because you might incorporate mistakes that are hard to remove from to rewire your brain to speak correctly and like pronounce them correctly. For me, it was very hard to keep going until 1,000 hours without speaking, especially because I'd like to see some like milestone or some like to see okay, I achieved something. So I really wanted to try it before. So I tried like around 600 to 700 hours. I did some
Mm-hmm.
italki lessons, right? And I felt like I wasn't speaking like as I'm speaking now, but I still did some of them. Like I was doing like one or twice a month, maybe just casual
Mm-hmm.
conversations, like very slow and like half an hour or 1 hour classes. I felt it was helping, but then again, after a point, I was like, okay, I find it hard to express myself. So I think I did it for like 3 or 4 months, and it wasn't a lot of classes, right? So I said
Mm-hmm.
like 2 or 3 a month, maybe max. So after 4 months, I think I stopped, and then I was like, okay, let's focus again on doing input, right? Until
Mm-hmm.
I get to 1,000 hours. And then I started with italki again. Then I discovered Worlds Across, where I did the interview with them. And I think what really helped me was like having this consistency, because for example with italki it would just be up on me to just buy a class with a tutor, right? Where I Worlds Across, you have a subscription. And I think that was what motivated me. So I knew I spent this money, so I have to use my classes, otherwise I wasted my money basically.
Yeah.
So I would think of it kind of this way, to keep consistency. So since November 2023, I think, is when I bought my first package with Worlds Across for like 6 months during a Black Friday deal they had. And then I did 10 classes a month. So it would come down to like 2 to 2.5 per week. So like
Mm-hmm.
two per week plus 2 weeks with 3 classes or something like this. So it would be 10 classes a month. And I also jumped on the group sessions, which I think really helped me. Like talking with other people as well. And then basically right now I'm at about, I think, 180 or 70 hours of output,
Mm-hmm.
or 160. I don't recall exactly, so I don't wanna say anything that's incorrect,
Yeah.
but around 160, 170.
Sure.
Um, and I feel okay. I think I have one advantage, which is like I'm from Greece, as I said, and I think the phonetics and the accents of Greece sounds very similar to the Spanish from Spain.
Okay.
So even sometimes when I speak Greek on the street with a friend or with somebody else, people ask us if we're from Spain because it sounds so similar. So I
Okay.
think that's
Interesting.
that's one aspect of like why my accent sounds pretty good, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And it's there's also some YouTube videos that explain like how Greek and Spanish sounds, and that if you look under the comments, it's like some Spanish people saying Greek sounds to them like Spanish, or Greek people saying I'm learning Spanish and my accent is really good. So I think that's also what worked. And then again, I I don't have any tips or anything else regarding to kind of being fluent, or I don't know. I try to like express myself the way it makes sense to me in my head, but I don't want it. I try not to. I try to think of how a Spanish speaker would say it, and like how I know it from the videos, the way I've heard it. But obviously, there's still mistakes. Like I confuse a lot, like some past tenses, like I don't know the names, but sometimes I get very confused, right, with estuve or estaba or this stuff or fue or era.
Yeah.
So these kinds of things I still get mixed up, but I think it's just just a question of time and practice.
Yeah. No, I'm sort of having your Spanish speaking abilities. Obviously, it's a lot better than mine at the moment, but I definitely resonate with what you're saying. Like it's like, especially the past tense. Like I'm just trying to wrap my head around that still, but I think it just takes time. I'll just need more input, hear more examples of how it's used. But yeah, 170 hours. It's a fair bit. I don't know about you, but I found the speaking bit to be probably the bit that's a little bit more draining. That takes a little bit more effort to sort of, set up your computer and start speaking to someone online for an hour. Did you? I know you said you did two to three classes a week, I think. Was that pretty consistent, or did you sort of break it up where a month you might do a class every day, or was it just sort of consistently 2-3 classes a week?
No, well, I don't have so much free time. So, like, I don't want to spend all my free time in Spanish right now. So I try to like do 10 classes a month. I bought the package with 10 classes for 6 months for Worlds Across. So I had to do 10 classes a month. So no more than no more than that, including like, except for the group classes, which is more obviously. But yeah, I totally resonate and understand what you say, because at the beginning it feels so draining. Like my brain was like, I felt like I would talk for an hour or for 1 hour and a half with a tutor, and I would feel like so exhausted after that, like I couldn't even think anymore.
Yeah.
Whereas like consuming input feels so much easier, right? But
Yeah,
I
it's
think
easy.
outputting is such a whole different story. I think I've heard it from other people as well, that it's kind of like very, very hard, especially your first 50, 60 hours of output. I think I like when you start, I think it just like don't like, I think there's some people who just do unlimited classes on Worlds Across, and it's like they do a class a day, and I don't understand how they do it. I mean, I really admire them because it takes a lot of effort, and it's very draining, as you say, but I don't think I could have done it.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what I'm trying to do at the moment, but I am sort of tossing up reassessing if I keep that sort of approach up, because like it is quite hard, the level I'm at the moment, to sort of show up every day for a full hour and do it. But yeah, no, I'm looking forward to working with Worlds Across and sort of continuing those classes. And it's good to hear that you've used them and had a good experience overall.
Yeah, I mean, I've been pretty happy, and I think the most interesting and the most helpful thing for me was kind of, as I said, the memberships, because it helps you be consistent. And I intended to buy the package for 6 months because I knew if I buy for a month, then I might stop it the next month, so I wouldn't be as consistent as I am now.
Yeah, no, that's a really good way to look at it. It sort of locks you in for those 10 classes like what you had that you had to do, and you just find time within the month to get those done. I just wanted to sort of, obviously your English is very good. You're doing this interview in English, and you're from Greece, so I presume English isn't one of your native languages. How did you sort of go about, well, like, let's just like compare how you learnt English and that process compared to how you found learning Spanish. And also, you can also speak German, I presume. As you said, you lived in Germany for 15 years. So just within the three languages there, how do you sort of go about, well, four languages, sorry. Four, yeah. How do you compare them all?
So, yeah, I don't know. When you say to somebody else who's not from Europe that you speak 3 or 4 languages, I think they're like very impressed, right? But I think for
definitely.
Europeans, it's quite common. Like in my network, there's a lot of people who at least speak 3 languages. It's basically also because I grew up in Greece, so my native is Greek. But then I grew up with German because I have some kinds of family in German, and my parents also wanted me to learn German, so they sent me to a German school, right? So where I had to do everything in German basically since I was 4 years old. I would grow up with 2 languages. So it was kind of like not like us learning my native language, because I would never speak to my parents in German, but I would always have this German part in like school, from kindergarten to like elementary and then middle, high school. So I kind of basically learned it throughout the years. And I think when I moved to Germany, when I was 18 years old, I was like, okay, it really was when it helped me, like, I don't know, be more like speak more colloquially, right? But with English, it was also like I learned it at school through grammar books, as I did with German. So it wasn't like anything compared to like how I learned Spanish or how I learned Greek. So yeah, I learned two languages plus German, and Spanish just came after. But yeah, I don't know. I don't remember myself learning German or like English actively. Like I remember like exercises and grammar books and all of that. But I think
Mm-hmm.
because I started from this young age, I think it was quite important. It was quite like one of the factors that contributed to like speaking as I can speak in German and English right now. Because I think
Mm-hmm.
if I moved to Germany without speaking German when I was 18, I wouldn't be able to speak like as a native in German or as fluent as
Mm-hmm.
I can.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think for me the best was that I started that young, and it was kind of the whole school years I had these two languages plus my native one.
Yeah, no, I always find it really interesting when someone else has learnt, like a lot of the time, obviously, if someone's not from an English speaking country, they'll learn English as their second language. But the process of comprehensible input is still very new to them, which I don't think I sort of understood before I started talking to people in the community, because I always thought in my head, well, you've learnt English, like you'd just be able to learn another language, right? Like it can't be that hard. You've already done it.
Mm.
But obviously, like it's just a different approach to what they've done previously in school, traditionally, which is like the same in your case, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that the thing that with comprehensible input is like I don't think it's widely accepted yet. I mean, I don't like when my Spanish colleagues ask me how I learned Spanish. I say to them I learned with through watching videos. I mean, I still feel kind of like I'm making a fool out of myself. I mean, even if I can speak
Mm,
it very well right now, I'm like,
yeah.
if somebody asked me, like a colleague asked me the other day, oh, like, do you have any tips on like learning Spanish and stuff like this? By the way, I haven't told my colleagues I speak Spanish because I don't know why, but I can understand what they're saying, but they don't know I speak fluent.
Right.
So he was like, I was like, oh yeah, just look at German Spanish. But then when I was suggesting that to him, I kind of felt like he will look at it and then he will ignore it because it's like such a novel method, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, obviously people learn from, like with grammar books as well, like you said, touching on the topic of grammar, because obviously to a lot of people, dreaming Spanish and comprehensible can seem a bit out there and a bit of like a scam. Did you use grammar at all? Like when you started speaking, did you start touching on grammar, or did you not touch it at all? What was your experience with that?
Well, I told you that during the pandemic I bought about this book, Spanish Step by Step,
Mm-hmm.
or Easy Spanish Step by Step, which includes grammar, like explaining grammar concepts
Yeah.
and grammar exercises and everything. So I had some foundation from that, but it was really like basic A1 level. So like just the conjugations of like some verbs and like the tenses, but really basic stuff. So when I started again with streaming Spanish, I didn't remember all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Right now in my Worlds Across classes, I don't talk about grammar explicitly because I told them I want to do just speaking and conversations, and sometimes we will just touch on a concept when I have a question. So when I feel like I'm speaking with a person with a tutor, and I said something that maybe sounded wrong, or I said it but I didn't know why I said it this way, I would
Mm-hmm.
ask, okay, why is it this way or why is it not this way, and then they would explain it to me.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't happen very often, and it only happens when I have some kind of uncertainty, right? So it would just come from me. So I would ask them, but we wouldn't look into any slides, nor would I do any homework, for example. So yeah, I don't try to avoid grammar. I mean, I learned with grammar. I learned through grammar, like the other two languages I speak, which is German and English. So I know grammar concepts and I know how to explain them, but with Spanish, I didn't want to look into it basically because I wanted to follow the Dreaming Spanish roadmap. And also
Mm.
because at the beginning, before I started and the first times I started, I was like looking into it and I was getting very worried. Okay, what's the subjunctive? And everybody going crazy about the subjunctive. But then again, through comprehensible input, I think all these grammar concepts come to your mind without you having to actively think about it. So when you say like, quiero que tengas, I don't know, it sounds much better than you say quiero que tienes, no? And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people are struggling with this when they learn through, I don't know, through grammar, right? Or through
Yeah.
traditional methods. But I think
Mm-hmm.
if you hear it in your head so many times, then it will just sometimes stick with you.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely see where you're coming from, but like I think for me, I've found like the grammar has helped, like me just being aware of it, kind of similar to what you said when you ask for an explanation why this is the case or why you think you said something was wrong. And it is kind of funny, I think, the way that we've learnt it. When you say,
Mm.
you kind of know when you're saying something wrong. Do you sort of have the same thing? Like you'll say it because you want to get your point across, but you'll know it's wrong. Like a lot of the times I'll go to my tutor and we'll be in a conversation and I'll be like, I'll say a sentence, but at the end of it I'll say like, I know I said that wrong. Like how do you say what I was trying to say?
Yeah, that happens to me. That happens to me as well, especially during my classes at Worlds Across. When I talk with the tutors, I'm always like, sometimes I might be like, during a 1 hour class, I might do some mistakes, but then I even try correcting myself. So I would say something, and then I would say it again. I would rephrase it the correct way because I realized it was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And then they at the end of the classes, I have always asked them to like give me like not some list, but like tell me some mistakes that they encountered during the class, and then they would say,
Mm-hmm.
oh yeah, you did this mistake, but then you corrected yourself. I
Yeah.
don't know. I think it comes kind of intuitive, right? When you say something in your native language as well, which is English, and then it might sound wrong, then you know it sounds wrong, but you don't know exactly why it sounded wrong. But it's
Yeah.
just like,
Yeah.
yeah, you don't have an
Exactly.
explanation for it.
Yeah, like it still happens to me in English, and I feel like it happens to almost everyone in their native
Hmm.
language to some degree. I daily would make grammatical mistakes in English, even in these conversations. I'm sure I'm saying
Mm.
some things wrong, so it's completely normal. But yeah, I sort of find that concept quite interesting. That like you start to sort of realize like you can get your point across, but you know you're saying it wrong.
Yeah.
And I think it shows you're sort of going in the right direction as well. But just in regards to like, so you've learnt Spanish, you've done all these hours of speaking, you speak very well at the moment, I think. What are your plans for the future? Do you plan to use it sort of in day-to-day life at all, or move overseas where they speak Spanish? What are your thoughts on all of that?
Moving overseas would not be the easiest way because it's not just my own decision. So I want
Mm-hmm.
my girlfriend to be involved in this, and she doesn't want to move away
Sure.
from Berlin for now. So it's kind of hard.
Yeah.
I would be down to move to like a like Latin American country, or like even Spain. But
Yeah.
then again, it's kind of like doing an analysis of like, is it worth it? Like, with the life we have and the life we will do there. But I would be interested in trying it out, especially I think because it gives you a much different experience when you're like just a person speaking English in a Spanish speaking country versus a person speaking Spanish as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have any goals. So I started Spanish because we wanted to do this big trip through Latin America. And this is kind of on hold right now because of other plans. But I still want to continue like doing everything I can in Spanish. Like, I don't know, I read books as well in Spanish right now from Spanish authors, and I do YouTube. I listen to YouTube in Spanish. I watch YouTube videos and podcasts and everything. So I want to definitely continue doing that. And also a big part, like I like traveling, so I think in the next few years I might want to focus more on Spanish speaking countries to just use my Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and also, I don't know, make some friends. Like in Berlin especially, there is a big Latin community, so even kind of connect with them, or like make some friends in Spanish and stuff like this. So just not to only have the forced classroom environment that you have
Mm.
on with tutoring, right? um but yeah, I think it's just another language that will help me when traveling. It already helped me because we've been to Peru a few months back, and the experience was so different than a few years back when I went to other Latin American countries with no Spanish knowledge. So this is enough for me. But yeah, I don't know, I'm very looking forward to, like, I don't know, traveling more to Latin America and like connecting with people and stuff.
Yeah, well, I think that's the end goal for sort of everyone on a similar journey to us. Is at the end of the day, you want to use it in real life. It's nice to have
Mm.
conversations with tutors, obviously online, and to immerse in Spanish speaking content. I think that opens up like a whole new perspective and a whole new world, which is great. And as I said, good to meet tutors online, virtually. But I think at the end of the day, I think the main goal is to use it in real life, go travel, go connect with people. So yeah, I think that's the same with me. I just want to actually use it now. We've put in all those hours. So yeah, is there anywhere specific you think you'd like to go?
So yeah, I've been to a few places in Latin America, but the next on my list are definitely Argentina.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to go to Bolivia as well because I've only heard very good stuff about the country. And
Nice.
I've been to Mexico in the past, but this was just before the pandemic, so I really want to go again to just see a bigger part of the country and also experience it
Mm-hmm.
with speaking Spanish because I think it's just a different level than how you experience the country and how you connect with the people. So Mexico, I really want to go again because I also really enjoyed it. But then I'd say Argentina and Bolivia and then Central America. And also Spain. Spain is very easy to reach from here. It's just a 2-hour flight. So
True, of course.
that you can easily do. That's one of the benefits of being in Europe.
Yeah. No, very nice. Yeah, you're very lucky. I'm very jealous when I hear people that they're 2 hours away from Spain in Europe or, just any countries you want to travel to in Europe. I think everyone in Australia is always very jealous because it takes a while to get to sort of any place in Europe or Latin America. So, no, but that sounds really exciting. It sounds like you've got a few places to tick off there. But just before we wrap up this interview, obviously, want to thank you for coming on. And just before we wrap up, just one bit of advice you would give for someone, or a few if you have, for someone who's just sort of just starting out, they're just sort of gone down the YouTube rabbit hole of incomprehensible import and dreaming Spanish. What would you suggest to them?
I think the most important thing, at least for me, was because I didn't trust the process at the beginning, so I was very hesitant with starting, and I was like, I would spend like 2 hours a day or 1 hour a day, and I would be very worried if it works. So I think we can both say it works, right? It just trust it and just do it. I mean, it might seem like different than the other processes and what language school try to sell you, but I think if you start and then if you are able to invest a certain amount of hours and keep it consistent throughout a few months and a year, I think it really pays off in the long term. And also for me, I don't know if it happened with you, but I had the feeling at an advanced stage, especially after reaching 1,000 hours and also after reaching an intermediate level at the beginning, I felt like there was kind of a plateau. So I didn't know if I was making any progress, and I didn't notice any real progress back then. But I think it was because back then you have accumulated a certain amount of hours. So with 1,000 hours in the pocket, it's hard to notice such big progress and such big leaps when you do from super beginner to beginner, right? Which is just 50 hours. But then from 1,000 to 1,050, you don't notice any difference, and sometimes you might be wondering, what am I still doing? Is it still worth doing it and spending all this time? But I'd say it's still worth it. I think what I also said with in my Walls Across interview was like I was being very frustrated at some points, like because I wanted to start speaking early. I wanted to like experience the language, and then I would just have to watch these videos or like listen to podcasts without doing anything else. So I think that's also part of the whole process.
Yeah, for sure. No, I totally agree with that. Especially in terms of the plateau, I think it gets to the point once you hit it's sort of like, the plateau just gets bigger and bigger the more hours you get in almost. In terms of like, there'll be obviously with people like us now, there'll be no day-to-day difference. Or even month to month, to be honest, I don't feel like there's much difference, but there probably would be. But some days I'll try to speak and I'll just be like, am I going backwards? Like, I do not feel like I'm progressing at all. But as you said, I think it's important to just trust the process, and trust that you'll get there just with time. But thanks so much for coming on, Nico. I'm sure everyone would have appreciated what you've had to say and your advice and everything else you've mentioned in between. So it's great story you had, and thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you, Luke. It was nice meeting you and chatting.
Thanks, guys.